For 3 years, I woke up every morning and the first thing I did was look at my feet. Not because I wanted to, because I needed to know what kind of day it was going to be. Some mornings they were there, present. I could feel the sheets against my toes, feel the floor when I stood. Other mornings, the bottom half of both feet felt like they belonged to someone else. Like the signal between my brain and my feet had been rerouted overnight and nobody told me. I'm 83 years old. I've lived in this body for 8 decades. I know the difference between stiffness and absence. What I was feeling, or not feeling, was absence. And what I know now, that I didn't know then, is that absence doesn't start in your feet. It starts years earlier, in vessels so small you need a microscope to see them. By the time you feel it in your toes, the process has been running quietly for a long time. That process has a name. And the morning drink that I want to tell you about works directly on that process, not on the symptom, on the mechanism underneath it. But before I get to the drink, I need you to understand why mornings matter more than any other time of day for this specific problem. Because the drink only makes sense once you understand the window. When you sleep, your body goes without water for 7, 8, sometimes 9 hours. You wake up dehydrated, not dramatically, not in a way you'd recognize as thirst, but dehydrated in the way that research has specifically documented in adults over 60, a state where your cells are operating below optimal hydration without triggering the sensation of being thirsty. The alarm system dulls with age. The dehydration continues silently. Here's what that matters for your feet. When your cells are mildly dehydrated, glucose concentrates in your bloodstream. The ratio of sugar to fluid shifts. And concentrated glucose, sitting in narrow vessels in the quiet hours of morning, is exactly the condition under which a specific type of damage accelerates. Researchers call the compounds produced by this damage advanced glycation end products. Most people have never heard that term. Your doctor knows it. But in a standard appointment, there are exactly 8 minutes to cover your numbers, your medications, your labs. The biochemistry of what's happening inside your smallest blood vessels doesn't fit in 8 minutes. It never gets explained. So let me explain it. Your feet are the furthest point from your heart. The blood vessels feeding the nerves in your toes are among the tiniest in your entire body. When glucose attaches to proteins in those vessel walls, which is what happens when blood sugar stays elevated, even moderately elevated, even in the ranges most people are told are acceptable, the walls stiffen. The vessels narrow, blood flow to the nerves slows, and the nerves, starved of oxygen and the nutrients that blood carries, begin to send unusual signals: tingling, burning, numbness, absence. That's not age, that's a report. Your nervous system filing a complaint about blood supply. Now, in that overnight fasting window, 8 hours without food, without water, with glucose concentrating and the dawn hormone cortisol beginning to rise before you're even awake, the conditions for this process are at their most active, which means the first thing you put in your body in the morning matters more than any other meal, not the most calories. The first signal. Drop your fasting blood sugar number in the comments right now, just the number. I want to see where people are starting because what I'm about to describe works differently depending on where you're beginning. The drink is not exotic, it's not expensive. I've been making it every morning for close to 2 years and the cost is under $1 a day. It starts with 16 to 20 ounces of warm water, not hot, warm. The temperature matters because cold water in a dehydrated morning stomach slows gastric absorption slightly. Warm water moves faster into your cells, begins rehydration sooner. Into that water goes the juice of half a lemon, and into that goes something that most people have in their spice cabinet and have never thought of as medicine. A half teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon. Not the common cassia cinnamon sold in most grocery stores, but the true variety, lighter in color, milder in smell, available online or in specialty stores for a few dollars more. And then one more thing. A small amount, a teaspoon, of raw, unfiltered apple cider vinegar. I know how that sounds. I resisted it for months. But here's what changed my mind. Research. Multiple independent studies, not one, has documented that this specific combination of compounds targets the glycation process at the cellular level. The cinnamon compounds have been studied specifically for their effect on insulin receptor sensitivity in peripheral tissue. The acetic acid in apple cider vinegar has been shown in published research to slow the rate at which glucose enters the bloodstream after a meal, and to reduce fasting glucose levels when taken consistently first thing in the morning. The lemon provides compounds, hesperidin, areocitrin, that research has associated with protective effects on capillary walls in people with elevated blood sugar. 3 ingredients, each with a documented mechanism, each targeting a different entry point in the same process. And when you drink it first thing, before coffee, before food, before anything, you're introducing those compounds into the bloodstream during the window when it matters most. While glucose is still concentrated from overnight, while the vessels are still in the inflammatory state that follows dehydration, before the first meal arrives. You're not lowering blood sugar with a drink. You're changing the conditions under which your first meal lands. That's a meaningful difference. A woman wrote to me a few months ago, 79 years old, 22 years of elevated blood sugar, retired teacher from Ohio. She said she had stopped mentioning the numbness in her feet to her doctor because every time she did, the answer was that it was to be expected given her history. She had accepted it as permanent. She started the morning drink. She added 2 other habits I'll describe in a moment. At 6 weeks, she wrote back and said the sensation in her left foot had partially returned. Not completely, partially. Enough that she noticed when she stepped on something cold. Enough that the floor felt different under her feet in the morning. She said, "I forgot that feeling was possible. I want to be careful here. What she experienced is not something I can promise you. The research on peripheral nerve recovery is nuanced. How much sensation can return and how quickly depends on how long the damage has been progressing and how much of it is reversible. But the research is also clear that the progression can be slowed, that the environment inside those tiny vessels can be improved, that the conditions for further damage can be changed. That's not a small thing. Now, the morning drink is one piece. I told you I added 2 other habits alongside it, and those 2 are what turned a single intervention into a system. The first is what I eat immediately after the drink, not an hour after, immediately after, within 20 minutes. And the rule is simple. Protein comes before anything else. Eggs, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, whatever form it takes, the protein arrives in your stomach before a single carbohydrate. The reason connects directly to the same mechanism as the drink. When protein is the first food your gut processes, specific hormones are released that slow how fast glucose from everything else you eat enters your bloodstream. Research has documented this effect clearly. Same breakfast, same carbohydrates, different order. The post-meal glucose spike is dramatically lower when protein leads. And lower post-meal glucose means less glycation. Less glycation means less ongoing damage to the vessels feeding your feet. The second is the 10-minute walk after dinner. Not a long walk, not exercise in the way people think of exercise. 10 minutes of movement, around the house, around the block, slow, after your evening meal. Your muscles, when they move, activate a glucose transporter that works independently of insulin. It pulls sugar out of your bloodstream and into muscle tissue using a completely different pathway than the one that's impaired by insulin resistance. Research comparing post-meal walking to longer workouts at other times of day found that the short walk after dinner reduced the overnight glucose curve more effectively than a longer session in the morning. Your feet are most vulnerable during sleep. What your blood sugar does in the hours just before you go to sleep determines what the vessels in your feet are exposed to all night. The 10-minute walk is the cheapest intervention for that window that exists. Morning drink. Protein first. 10-minute walk. Those 3 form the system. The drink opens the window. The protein controls what happens to that window at breakfast. The walk protects the overnight window. And for the nerve tissue itself, the small fibers that have already been under stress, nutritional support that works at the cellular level inside those fibers is what I added as the 4th layer. There are compounds studied specifically in the context of peripheral nerve health and oxidative stress in diabetic tissue. The research on this goes back decades and is more robust than most people realize. Not a trend, not a supplement industry claim. Peer-reviewed clinical work. If your feet burn at night, or go numb, or feel cold no matter how many socks you wear, please don't ignore it. I almost did, and I'm 80 years old. For years I told myself it was just age, the tingling, the heaviness in my legs climbing the stairs. But it wasn't age. It was my blood sugar quietly damaging the nerves and the circulation in my legs, and almost nobody warned me in time. If you let it keep going, those little signals turn into something you can't undo. I wasn't willing to lose my feet or my independence. So I started doing one thing every single day to help support healthy blood sugar and protect my legs. I'll show you exactly what in this video. And if you want the simple support I personally use, there's a free presentation linked in the description below. Drink opened the window, but a window doesn't take you anywhere by itself. What I found on the other side of the morning drink was that I had created a metabolic moment, 30 minutes where my bloodstream was more receptive than at any other point in the day. Rehydrated cells, quieter vasopressin, the polyol pathway running slower than it had been in the fasting hours. And once I understood that window existed, I understood that what I did next mattered as much as the drink itself. Protein immediately after. Eggs, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, not because of the protein content alone, but because of the hormonal signal it sends before glucose arrives from anything else. When protein is the first solid food your gut processes, your body releases a hormone called GLP-1 that slows gastric emptying and blunts how quickly carbohydrates from the rest of breakfast enter your bloodstream. Research has documented this clearly. Same meal, same total carbohydrates, protein eaten first, and the post-meal glucose curve is meaningfully reduced. For nerve fibers that have been living inside a high glucose environment for years, a flatter morning curve is not a preference. It is a protected window that didn't exist before. The drink created the opening. The protein kept it open through the morning. 12 hours later, the same logic applies at the other end of the day. A 10-minute walk after dinner. Not exercise in the traditional sense, a biological mechanism. Movement activates a glucose transporter in muscle tissue called GLUT4 that pulls sugar out of the bloodstream independently of insulin. It doesn't need your pancreas. It doesn't care about your insulin resistance. It simply clears what dinner raised before sleep begins. Research comparing post-meal movement to longer workouts at other times found that 10 minutes after dinner reduced the overnight glucose exposure more than a longer morning session. The walk doesn't need to be fast. It needs to happen within 30 minutes of finishing dinner. The drink opened the morning. The protein extended it. The walk closed the day cleanly. And what runs between those two endpoints? The overnight hours, the fasting window, the hours when the polyol pathway is most active, is where the third piece matters most. A consistent bedtime in a cool room. Same time every night. Room at 66 degrees. Research on sleep architecture has established that your body needs to drop its core temperature to enter slow-wave sleep, the stage where insulin sensitivity is partially restored and cortisol behaves predictably. A variable bedtime and a warm room both reduce time in that stage. What your blood sugar does between 2 and 4 in the morning is partly determined by what your bedroom looks like when you fall asleep. The man I told you about, the retired electrician from Pennsylvania who felt the edge of his work boot against his left little toe for the first time in 3 years, he didn't just drink the drink. He added the protein breakfast the same week, the walk after dinner 2 weeks later. The sleep structure took him another month to build consistently. He wrote me at 8 weeks, the feeling at the toe. At 12 weeks he wrote again, the feeling had moved, not just the toe, the ball of the foot. He said, "I thought the word permanent meant something different than it does. I'm not promising that. The research on nerve fiber recovery is careful, and so am I. What the research supports is that the internal environment of those nerve cells can be changed. The polyol pathway can be slowed, and when the environment changes, what those cells are capable of changes with it." Underneath the habits, at the cellular level where the polyol pathway actually runs, nutritional compounds studied specifically for their effect on oxidative stress in peripheral nerve tissue complete the system. Decades of peer-reviewed clinical trials, consistent findings across independent research groups, not preliminary, documented mechanisms on exactly the tissue type producing the symptoms you're feeling in your feet and toes. The drink found the window. The protein in the walk built the day around it. The sleep protected the night. The cellular support works on what the years already touched. If you made it this far, you already understand more about your own legs than most people your age ever will. That matters. You know now that the burning, the numbness, the cold feet, they trace back to one thing: blood sugar slowly working against your nerves and circulation. And you know the goal isn't a miracle. It's protecting your ability to stand, to walk, to stay independent. That's why, alongside everything I showed you today, I use a simple daily support to help keep my blood sugar in a healthy range, so my legs keep carrying me where I want to go. I put the free presentation in the description below. Go watch it. And as always, keep working with your doctor. This supports your routine. It doesn't replace it. If you're on medication for blood sugar, I am not asking you to stop. My doctor knows what I do every morning. She adjusted nothing, because nothing I do conflicts with treatment. It completes it. Track your fasting number every morning for 30 days. Write it down. Bring those 30 days to your next appointment. A conversation built on 30 consecutive mornings of your own data is a different conversation entirely from one built on a quarterly lab draw. Drop the word toes in the comments if something in here resonated, and drop your fasting number. I want to know where you're beginning.